Hi everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another episode of this. Alright, I've been promising for 2 weeks to finally get around to doing holiday horror, and the week has come. Nothing too catastrophic happened to where I felt the need to push this back. I couldn't anymore. But we are here, we're going to talk horror. I am settled in. The Christmas tree's back here. There's a candle lit over there. I've got a plate of Christmas treats that, yes, I'm going to sit and eat while doing this. And I've got a cup of rich tea in a festive mug. Oh, we're doing this. So, let's get started. I guess where we want to really begin is in talking about the tradition of telling ghost stories around Christmas time. This is going to be a very diluted snippet. There's not going to be a whole lot historically accurate, kind of, but I mean, we're not getting into details here. This is all very much an overview so that I can get to talking about movies. So I guess if you want to really get down to it, the tradition of telling ghost stories around this time of year is pre-Christian, pre-Christmas, pre-all of that. And if you have to put a date on it, it would be the pagan tradition of Yule, which if you're watching this video on the day I put it up, blessed Yule if you celebrate. Today is Yule. The thing is Yule is the darkest day of the year. It's the longest night. And there's something about this day. There's something about this overwhelming darkness that of course puts human minds in touch with death. And like All Hallows Eve, Samhain, it was thought that the dead had a little more they could get closer to the living on this night. With the pagan traditions with Yule, there's a lot to do with death. And paganism is enormous. There are so many different subsets of it, but I know some of them celebrate tonight as the death of one of the gods. Death brings rebirth. So the death of one god, instant rebirth of another. But there's talk of death. So it was very common. You're huddled around a fire. It's dark early. It's not time for bed yet. You're imbibing of certain libations, and ultimately ghost stories happen. So let's jump ahead. We are definitely in Christian times now. Let's go to Stuart, England. And in the 17th century, Oliver Cromwell and his crazy people overthrew the monarchy. They executed the king, Charles I, and the Puritans kind of took over England and started ruling it. Now, the Puritans were very much against celebrations and festivities. They found it vulgar. Everything with the Puritans was supposed to be very downplayed. If you just think everything Puritan as the colors of beige and gray, if that gives you a good picture, that's where you are. So for many years, there were no Christmas festivities, and up until that point it had been a tradition to tell ghost stories at Christmas. And the Puritans tried very hard to enact laws and give out punishments to people who refused to obey these laws. It didn't work. There was a lot of rebellion. There was a lot of, you can't take our fun away from us. I don't think that's wrong of people, though. I mean, yeah, don't take our fun. But finally, when the monarchy was reinstalled and Charles I came back in, he was known for a time as the Merry King because he reinstated the celebrations of Christmas, that being able to close your businesses, which the Puritans, no, you had to be open on Christmas Day, you had to work. And which is weird because they were like a fundamentalist religious group, and you would think that they would allow a day of rest for the birth of their savior. I don't get those people, but neither here nor there. So it was reinstated, this Christmas celebrations, but because of that years-long break, they kind of didn't really get around to back to the ghost storytelling around Christmas. They kind of lost it for a bit until an author in Victorian times decided to write a book that we still recite from today, that they're still making movies about this. I will be watching one tonight starring the Muppets, and that's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. He wanted to kind of resurrect the storytelling of ghost stories. There were also political reasons for writing that book. I'll get to it on A Case for Classics someday. I'm not doing it around Christmas because don't tell me what to do, but it is a great book and I will be talking about it. But thanks to Charles Dickens, that has been resurrected. And now we have this very strange, since the advent of the moving picture, and since movies have become such a staple in modern society, we have this wealth of Christmas horror movies. Now, I did try to avoid the ones, because there are a lot of movies that take place around Christmas and definitely have Christmas as a background, but aren't necessarily Christmas horror, if that makes any sense. And it's a fine line to walk. I mean, you might not agree with some of these picks, but these, I have to tell you, there's one on this list that I'm going to talk to you about today I haven't watched, and I have no good reason why. We'll get to it, but these are the movies I think sort of best symbolically put into mind what Christmas horror should be for me, especially to a modern mentality. You don't want to get too classical all the time. There's nothing wrong with classical sometimes. I mean, again, we're still making movie versions, TV versions, stage versions of A Christmas Carol, and that's great. I've seen a stage version of A Christmas Carol that was done, and it was sort of an amphitheater in Seattle where it was a circle and the actors would come up into the rows with us. It was a really great play. But it's still important, but I like the modern spins on things. I like some of these movies are bonkers. Like, they go completely crazy and they're fun. Like, if we're at this time of year, we want to put an emphasis on fun, on togetherness, on it, just kind of relaxing and putting your feet up. It's the end of the year. They're usually long years, especially the older you get. The time goes by faster, but the walk is longer, if that makes any sense. So, let's get started. I'm going to have, I'm a little bit of an Anglophile when it comes to Christmas baking. This is gingerbread. Not gingerbread cookie, just gingerbread. It's like cake. It's so good. But, I grew up, also, sound off below, what are your favorite Christmas treats? I grew up, my dad has a really big sweet tooth. Like, I never met a female chocoholic growing up. My dad's a huge chocoholic, huge sweet tooth. So my mom would make the treats that my dad liked best. And it wasn't things like cakes. There wasn't a whole lot of candy. Homemade candy came from my grandmother. But by the time I started getting older, my grandmother, for as long as I can remember, most of my childhood, she was very sick, very ill health. So she wasn't able to do a lot. But she did occasionally whip out the kitchenware, and she made old world Christmas treats. She would make breads, braided breads with raisins in them, with that kind of frosting on it that gets really hard, and it like hurts your teeth when you bite into it because it's hard. But she would also make candy, homemade candy. And her kitchen would smell like heaven when she would get around to doing this. But, growing up, it was all the stuff my dad liked. So it was like chocolate chip cookies, sugar cookies. My dad loved oatmeal cookies and peanut butter cookies. And that would usually be it. I still love chocolate chip cookies. Why wouldn't I? I still like peanut butter cookies. My kids in particular love peanut butter cookies. And I still love sugar cookies. And I make them. I mean, I don't do a whole lot to make them pretty because I've got other things to do. But one thing I do is, instead of making like a royal icing or one of those thin frostings where you can decorate it and make it really pretty, I just make a big batch of buttercream cake frosting and put it on there. Oh, so good. But over time I found I really like those old school kind of English treats. So, like with the gingerbread, that's something we don't do around here very much. We like the cookies, which, listen, I've tried so many times to make gingerbread men and decorate them. They keep looking like fetish dolls. They keep coming out looking like BDSM dolls. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but it keeps coming out wrong. But, okay, so one that's a classic that everybody hates, it's like a joke, is fruitcake. I don't like store-bought fruitcake. I make my own. And yes, it can be used as a personal weapon. I made it with brandy this year. So good. I love fruitcake. Always add a little more booze than the recipe calls for. and it has to sit. You have to wrap it up real tight and let it sit for at least 2 weeks to let the flavors kind of meld. You gotta let the alcohol kind of mellow. I make rum balls for my husband. I make Linzer cookies. Here, let's find out. That's a Linzer cookie. It's a almond short crust. It's like a shortbread cookie, but made with almonds. And then it's got jam in between. There's raspberry jam and apricot jam. Those are the ones I make. And then these are little mincemeat pies, but this isn't like the mincemeat pies my grandma used to make, which I have to tell you I love, but suet's kind of hard to get your hands on here in the States. So this is a cranberry filling. It's got port, cranberries, currants, dried currants, and a lot of orange zest. And they're real zippy. They're, you know, if you've ever had normal mincemeat, which I think you can buy it in jars in the store. If you've ever had it, it's very rich, very heavily spiced. This is still heavily spiced. It's still got the cloves and the cinnamon in it, but it's a lot lighter because it doesn't have the suet, and the main fruit is cranberries as opposed to cooking apples. And I also make, this is a candy cane fudge, and then we've got a white chocolate cherry fudge. And I like the things that they feel more traditional. There's something about these long winter nights in the cold and being inside where you want the things that are heavily spiced, that smell a certain way. And even that little kind of zing of alcohol in it. There is just something very, I don't know, very ancient feeling about it to me. So I do make some of the things that I had as a kid, but I definitely, it's a tradition in this house. Like my kids know. My son, who loves cranberries, my oldest son, loves these. I don't tell him what they're called because obviously the name mincemeat, he's going to be like, he doesn't understand, it's just dried fruit. But he calls them cranberry pies, and he's like, are you making the cranberry pies again this year? Of course I am, of course I am. So, yeah, old school treats. I love them. This gingerbread, seriously. So good. Everything is made. I don't really buy anything. I buy like M&Ms. You gotta have, I've got this jar with Santa Claus all over it, and it's the M&M jar. It has to come out every year, and Christmas M&Ms are a staple in this house. But everything else I make, and it takes a very long time, and I don't even feel like eating most of this shit for the first few days because I'm so tired. But I get around to it. So we've got a plate. Let's start talking movies. Gremlins. First of all, I just love Joe Dante. You know I love Joe Dante. If you've ever listened to any of these where I talk about movies, you know I love Joe Dante. I love Gremlins. So I watched it last night, and there's two things I want to talk about. The first being, I was watching it and I was reading the IMDb trivia on it, and there was mention that one of the notes that they got from the studio when they were making this movie was that there were too many gremlins and that they should take them out. And Steven Spielberg, who's the producer of this movie, was like, yeah, sure, we'll just take all the gremlins out and call the movie People. Which, I love that. I love that snark. I love this movie. I love how they're able to use horror and silly Muppets, kind of puppets of the monsters, to kind of mask all the horror that goes on in this movie. Like, they kill people, and it's funny. The Mrs. Deagle, she's definitely dead after flying out of that window, and you laugh. I mean, I love that kind of storytelling where it's like, it's okay. You can laugh at that. It's okay. But I was watching it last night, and it occurred to me, throughout the movie, and it begins at the very beginning of the movie, there's a DJ, a radio DJ, who's famous in the area. His name is Rockin' Ricky Rialto. And throughout the movie, you'll get little snippets of his radio broadcast, especially when the gremlins kind of start messing around. And people are calling in being like, there are little monsters going all over town. And Rockin' Ricky's like, God, Rockin' Ricky's sick of this from you people. And oh, there's something breaking in. And so Rockin' Ricky kind of has his own little side story going on. And I mentioned on Twitter, it was like, I want a Rockin' Ricky movie, just on what's going on with him. And for the main reason, because towards the end of the movie, when they start getting everything under control, after they've blown up the movie theater, you hear Rockin' Ricky, and he's like, Rockin' Ricky's still here. We got the National Guard on board, and we're going to hose them all down, which, that's not good. I really feel like we need that story now, because by this time, It's just Stripe in the main story going on. It's just Stripe, and they're in the department store by that time. It's the end scene. But obviously, some of those gremlins got away. They weren't in the movie theater. They've been messing with Rockin' Ricky and his radio station, and they're about to get hosed down. Shit's about to happen. And we don't get that story, and I gotta tell you, I want it. Although the regular movie's great too. That was made in 1984. Also in 1984, we have Silent Night, Deadly Night. This is the movie I haven't seen, and I have to tell you, I have no good reason why. This is right up my alley. It is in a time frame where I don't know why I didn't see it as a kid. And my excuse right now is that I don't think I could watch this with my kids. My kids are sensitive to stuff like this. They're not huge horror fans. So when we're sitting down to watch Christmas movies, we're watching more of the traditional stuff. Even more, what's the word I want? Modern. More modern ones. More recent ones. That's the word I wanted. And I don't think Silent Night, Deadly Night would be one for them, but I do want to watch this movie. It is definitely on my list. Maybe next year I'll lock myself in here and watch it on my computer, but this is one that makes so many of the lists, and I know what it's about. A guy goes crazy and dresses up as Santa and kills a bunch of people. Which oddly enough is kind of the premise of another one too. But yeah, I have no excuse. I want to watch it. Someday I will get around to it, but it makes enough of the lists everywhere else. I think it should be mentioned here. 1974, the dates are going to be all over the place on this, by the way. I didn't do that. But 1974, we have the movie Black Christmas. Now, what's crazy about this? First of all, this is a legitimately good movie, legitimately good ending, because endings are hard, but I love the way this one ends. Bob Clark made this movie? Like, Bob Clark made A Christmas Story. He made Porky's. Why is Bob Clark's career all over the place? I'm not sure if this was his first. I forgot to look that up. But considering 1974, it was at least one of his first. But this is an actual scary movie. It is actual horror. There's actual building of tension and suspense. And death scenes. Like, I think the acting was superb. I think the setting was superb. I think this is a legit good movie. But also, Bob Clark. He all over the place with that guy, but I like this movie. The next one, 1980, Christmas Evil. This is another one where someone kind of snaps, goes crazy, dresses up as Santa and kills a bunch of people. But there's something about this one that's sad, because I've never watched Silent Night, Deadly Night, but I get the feeling that one is a little more craven in its violence. With Christmas Evil, the reason for the snap is very sad. Very sad. And the whole, crazy guy, his whole demeanor, it's tragic, and it's a good movie. 1997, Jack Frost. This is one that's just completely bonkers. This movie, serial killer turned into mutant snowman. And it's a low budget movie, and like it's literally like a styrofoam snowman with angry eyebrows. But I love this movie. It's so silly. Obviously not one for the kids. Really, not one for the kids. But a really fun movie. Like, if you have teenagers and stuff, I think this is a good movie for them, because it's so weird. And it's one of those movies that completely commits. This is Fudge, I'm sorry. It completely commits to being batshit crazy. They don't flinch away from going there. I've always thought this movie was a lot of fun. The next movie, 2010, Rare Exports. Now, I watched this movie for the first time last year, around this time. And I watched it for the Ghost Writers podcast. Had never seen it before. Watched it. And I talked absolute shit about this movie on that episode. But I have to tell you, it's been a year later. I think about this movie all the time. Now, a year later, I'm still mad at the ending. That ending, I'm mad about it. They should have woke him up. It should have happened. But this movie, it pulls such a fast one on you, where you think that's Santa. Well, it's not Santa. Where you think You know where it's going. But you don't. Like, you're so confused throughout this movie. And it just keeps getting weirder and weirder and weirder. It keeps raising the bar on you going, what is going on? And again, I gave this movie shit last year. I talked absolute crap about it last year. But I think about it all the time. I'm going to have to rewatch it. I'm going to have to revisit it. Mostly to see if I'm still mad about that ending. I am still mad about that ending, but I gotta make double sure. But 2010, Rare Exports, very strange movie. And I don't know whether I like it or not. But I do feel it's worth a rewatch, which I don't always feel that way. So, that must mean you should give it a try. Let's go back to 2005. I watched this movie when it first came out. Santa's Sleigh. Again, committed to the complete and total batshit premise. Bill Goldberg, who, if you don't know, and if you don't, why, wrestler, plays Santa. Now, in this one, the premise is that Santa is the son of Satan. And he has been imprisoned for being the son of Satan. He's been imprisoned. And what he had to do during this time of imprisonment was to be jolly old St. Nicholas, to go around and give kids presents. But now his imprisonment is over and he can be unleashed to do whatever he wants. And he's fucking sick of kids and giving out presents. And he just starts destroying people, houses. Oh my god, it's a violent movie, but it's also, like, I'm trying to remember. It's been a couple years since I watched it. I don't think Bill Goldberg really talks in this movie. It's just a lot of screaming. And it's actually, like, it's funny, and it's fun, and it is a movie you have to see. If you haven't seen it, you have to. You have to watch Bill Goldberg in a fur-lined red coat and long grayish beard just completely smash the shit out of people. Completely committed to the batshit crazy premise. 2015, Krampus. Now, I don't think this movie's great. I thought it was I thought it was sloppily done. But if you haven't seen it, I still think you should. Honestly, the curiosity is going to get you anyway. But, like, if this were any other monster, I would say the same thing. It was sloppily done. It wasn't a good movie. The fact that it's Krampus, and by 2015, Krampus had kind of been making a big appearance over here in the States. By this point, I myself had read a couple of books based on Krampus. A lot of the indie horror writers were writing books and novellas and short stories about Krampus. And they finally made a movie, and it was just such a letdown because Krampus was really having a moment at this time. And you watch the movie, and it's like, that was stupid. But if you haven't seen it, give it a try. You waste your time on stupid movies all the time. I know you do. 1993, The Nightmare Before Christmas, which isn't necessarily horror. It's a kid's movie, but I have to tell you, I think this movie is still good. This movie's still good for being stop motion animation, for the music and everything. Netflix has a show called The Movies That Made Us. I probably talked about it on here before, but it's such a good show. It's such a good kind of short documentary show, kind of like what VH1 did with Behind the Music. This is what it's doing for movies that were very culturally important to us in a certain time. They did the horror movies recently, and oh, it was so fun. But they did A Nightmare Before Christmas, and they talked about the crew who made this movie, and Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman had a huge part in the making of this movie, in the making of the main character, Jack. If you haven't seen it, at least watch that episode. Watch all of them seriously. But watch the episode on this. And I really hope, even after all these years, I hope those people are still proud of what they made. I hope Danny Elfman is still proud of the music that he created, all the singing that he did. I think this movie is kind of incredible considering the conditions under which it was made. But even if it was made in the most high-end studio with all the accommodations they could have wanted, it's still great. It just is. And I love that Tim Burton aesthetic. You come to find out he didn't actually have a lot to do with the making of this movie, but that Tim Burton aesthetic of the no right angles, the no completely vertical buildings where everything's always kind of leaning, it's incredible in this movie, and I just love it. So the last movie that I want to talk about, what do I want next? Let's get more. The last movie that I want to talk about is one that I also just watched for the first time last year, but it just came out in 2018, so it hasn't been out for very long. But I watched it last year. My husband and my youngest son were like offended by this movie. They were not impressed. They were very unhappy. And my oldest son and I loved this movie. We laughed our asses off because this movie, it's low budget. It's very aware that it's low budget. And it's not trying to be more than what it could possibly be, while also not being obnoxious in its we're being silly thing. Now, look, especially over on the Ghostwriters podcast, we talk about a lot of movies that are low budget, that are bad, that are silly. And something I've learned is that there's a very fine line between we're low budget and silly, and we're proud of being low budget and silly, and now we're going to be fucking obnoxious about it to the point where this movie's unwatchable. It is a very fine line, and it's actually very easy to fall over on this side and completely ruin your movie. It happens all the time. We talk about movies like that all the time, where it's actually kind of offensive that this movie got made, that people keep using the horror genre to make these ridiculous movies that don't even have a story, that don't even have any real dialogue. You end up not caring about any of the characters. This movie, Santa Jaws, is one that I watched for the show, for the Ghostwriters podcast. And it is silly, and it is bad. This is not a great movie, except it is. I had so much fun with this dumbass movie. Santa Jaws 2018. You can find it really easily. Horrible effects. Oh my god. Horrible effects. The premise is silly. There's a pool floaty in this movie that you're supposed to take as a real aquatic animal. But they just get it just right. Just barely. And yet it's still, this is a movie I very much thought was worth my time. Again, my husband and my youngest son were like, ew. My oldest son and I had a blast with this movie, laughing our butts off. It's so ridiculous, but it's so ridiculous it comes back around to being great. Santa Jaws 2018. And that'll be it for me. I have to tell you, there is a possibility I won't be posting a video next week. Everybody's still off for Christmas break then, and I don't know if I'll be able to get away. We're staying in. We're not going anywhere because we're still in a pandemic. But they might need me for other things. So there is a possibility there won't be a video next week. But after that, there will definitely be a video. So I will see you all in the new year. Sound off below. What are your favorite Christmas treats? Have you watched any of these movies? Are there any you think I must watch? Any holiday horror that's very much Christmas themed, not just happening at Christmas, that you think that I should watch, because I can always add to the pile. So let me know. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a long year, but you know, oh God, I almost forgot. So last year, this time last year, this was still the Patreon feed, but one of my Patreon subscribers, Dr. Josh, I think, if it wasn't Dr. Josh, I'm sorry, whoever it was, recommended me this book, and it says, Have Yourself a Movie Little Christmas by Alonzo Duralde. I'll put it below in the description. This is a book that talks about Christmas movies, all the Christmas movies, like Die Hard's in here. And this is a great book. I had a great time reading this book. It's pure fun, just for if you're a fan of holiday movies, excuse me, I shouldn't eat during videos. If you're a fan of holiday movies, grab this book. I got it off Amazon. It's not overly priced or anything. Give it a go and give it a read. And burble, I will see you all in the next year. Happy holidays if you celebrate. Be safe. And thank you, as always, for being here. All right. Is it going to be a Christmas miracle? Let's see. Let's see. Is it going to do it? It didn't.